Sit here for a minute and wait on you guys before I start. Thank you. So this is very new to me, by the way. I have never been live on Instagram. I'm actually fresh and new back to Instagram, so forgive me if there are any technicalities. I'm still learning, and I'm just grateful that you all are joining me right now. I want to say, as we get started, thank you to Dion Figgins for facilitating this union with Miss Sierra Boggess. I love the name, by the way. I was emailing with her last night. I'm so grateful that she allowed me to take over her platform for the day and just share my experiences with you, as well as get to know you. I was doing a little bit of research on her because we've actually never met. But I felt right at home when I went to her website because it spoke about the light and how she emphasized that you are enough. And this morning I shared with you a passage from a book that I love, The Wisdom of Sundays from Oprah Winfrey. But after that, I felt really comfortable that I can come into this space and be something that I'm usually not allowed to be, which is vulnerable. As Black women, we are always told we have to be strong, we have to be, we have to fight, we have to, sometimes people call us angry. We can never be vulnerable, we can never cry, all of these things because we are strong Black women. But we are human as well. And I am so grateful that you've allowed me to just come into this space and share my experience with you. I know the numbers will fluctuate as we go on, but I am grateful that I get to hold space with you. And I just ask that you open your hearts and your minds to the journey that I'm about to share with you. So some of you know now, my name is Valisia LeKae Little. Actually, Little is my last name, but I go by Valisia LeKae because Valisia and LeKae were names given to me by my mother that represent my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother is Kay. My mother is Kay, my grandmother is Kate, and I am LeKae. My mother specifically chose L-E because she said it represented a level of strength instead of L-A, like in the French, L-E and L-A versus, whatever. But she wanted to be LeKae because she wanted there to be a certain level of strength that I carried with me. And my first name is actually just a combination between my mother's name and my grandmother's name. My mom is Vanessa and my mother is Lily. And so the magical world of my mother that she lives in and the creativity in her mind, she combined the two, and here I am, Valisia LeKae. So as I was saying to you, I'm going to spend a little time just to talk about my journey. I'm here to take your questions as well. I'll come back sometime later in the day. I know that Sierra has an international audience. I found that out this morning. There were people this is very brand new to me, so welcome everyone to this space. I honor you today. So yes, so I read to you this morning a passage from The Wisdom of Sundays that spoke about something that Iyanla Vanzant was saying, and how she said that the lesson is, when you find yourself in a new situation, a new circumstance, a new life experience, everything that requires healing will rush to the surface. She goes on to say, and if you don't take a minute to breathe, to gather yourself, to pray, you will do what you've always done. And for me, as a woman of color, as a Black woman, I have always been going from one thing to the next, trying to get higher and higher in my career, trying to live a more prosperous, more abundant life. And it's interesting that I had to call my mother last night because I wanted her to remind me of what I was like as a child. And she said to me, well, you didn't speak for a long time. You didn't really talk. You were very quiet. And I said, well, what's a long time? 1 or 2 years old? And she was like, you really didn't talk very much until you were probably in kindergarten. So we're talking the first 5 years of my life. I spent a lot in silence. And for me, that means that I was observing a lot of what was going on around me. She said she would try to say little things to me. And she said I talked a little, but I would more or less touch her mouth, or my grandmother would try to speak to me and I would do the same to her. But it was just a lot of silence. So I want you to remember that as I go through my journey with you, of how I was birthed into this world, not really speaking and very silent. So I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. My mother is a hairstylist. She also works for Federal Express. My grandfather was a barber. He is a barber. He still is. He's in his 80s. My grandmother holds multiple degrees. She also got her cosmetologist license as well. But she too, as well as my mother, are very strong, hardworking women. My grandparents are from Mississippi. I'm from Tennessee. So you already know. If you don't know, I suggest you look upon the history of Tennessee and Mississippi and know what states have with Black people. My grandmother, mother in the 50s, and I am a product of the 70s and 80s. Tip of the 70s, more of the 80s. So my first real way of speaking was always singing. I did not speak when I was younger, as I was saying to you, but my mother, because she was a single mother, she worked multiple jobs. She took us to this beautiful soul. She was our babysitter, but she was more like a grandmother to me. Her name was Lucille. And Lucille took me to church with her. And that is where I fell in love with singing. And that's how I learned to communicate. It brought me joy. It was my greatest connection to God. And it was how I brought joy, gave joy to myself. But when I did sing, I saw that people reacted a certain way. They were happy, they were sad, they were joyous, they were engaged. So I caught their attention, but not in the sense that I was trying to seek it. I just wanted to make them happy. I wanted them to feel something, and I got that from being at church. So that was really the way I communicated, and so that really took me through my elementary school years. It took me through junior high. Growing up in Memphis, Tennessee, I will say to you that I was raised by both my mother and my grandmother. By the time I graduated elementary school, and I had, really good grades and was very active in elementary school, I wanted to go to a better school, a more diverse school, to get a great education, and that meant leaving my mom's home. And you're talking about an 11-year-old girl saying to her mother, well, can I move with my grandmother so that I can be in the school district with her? And those are formidable years, as far as a relationship with mothers and daughters. And I can only imagine what her heart was like as she saw her daughter move into her mother's house. So I'm sure she was very torn about that. But she knew I needed to get a really, really good education. So I moved in with my grandmother with the intention of being able to get into a better school in her district. The situation ended up being, by the time that I applied as a Black girl, that they did not accept my application. They told me that we were no longer in the district. And so we searched for a different school for me to go to. I ended up going to East High School, which was a junior and a high school, junior school and a high school. I still live with my grandmother, so she really influenced my life from the time that I was 12, even till now. When I go home, I go straight to my grandmother's house, just because I love and adore her so much. So that sort of set the foundation of where I was, from elementary to junior high to high school, learning and being educated by my grandmother at home, going to a junior high school that was an optional school, which was, its focus was health science and engineering. So when I got to this school, it was really about, well, obviously you're going to become a doctor, because you're going to an optional school, a college preparatory school for health science and engineering. But when you sing and when you love singing and when that's your first way of communicating, you're going to find a way, at least I did, to do that. So I spent a lot of my high school years performing at the local theme park. I didn't go on my senior class trip because I wanted to work and perform. I entered different contests. Wherever it was going to allow me to sing, I was going to do it. We didn't really have a big choir at our school because, once again, we were focusing on health science and engineering. But I found a way to do it. And that led me to go on to graduate from high school and actually not even majoring in music. I mean, I tried out for the choral group at the university and I did not make it. And the university has apologized for that. But so I ended up first majoring in biology, and let me just say, it just wasn't for me. I am not good at science. It just wasn't my love. But eventually, I found my way to psychology. I sit on the board of my psychology department at the University of Tennessee for less than a year now, and I love everything about psychology. I want to go back to school and get my master's and my PhD because I love being able to be of service to people, to help you really, really dig deep into your soul and really find out what is really causing you the pain or the anguish that you're feeling. And I actually use my psychology degree to help me on the Broadway stage when I dissect my characters. It's the only thing I know how to do. I did not receive that, music theater background education. So I had to find my way there by any means necessary, which meant that I had to really think about the characters being human or make-believe and really think about how they felt. What were their emotions like? What were their relations like with their parents or, their childhood? I had to really dig deep in that space in order to create the being that I presented on stage. And that has served me well in many areas. And then I look back on my life and would have loved to have had that, music degree. I would love to be able to really play the piano. I pluck all, but I don't play. I really would love to be able to sight read music. I don't. I can, play an F or a G or whatever, but I'm not efficient in that area. I just love to sing. So when I left high school, after being a mascot at my university for the first 2 years, yes, I wore a dog costume, and I was a mascot at the soccer games or the baseball games or the women's basketball games. Yep, that was me. My junior and sophomore year. And then I did not make the team, so I needed another way to express myself through performance. And I remember auditioning for Dollywood, which is Dolly Parton's theme park in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And I got the job. So I spent my junior and senior year going to school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, taking classes, 18-hour days or whatever, 18-hour credits for Tuesday and Thursday, and then driving 45 minutes each way to perform at Dollywood. And I'd spent, like I said, my junior and senior year all the way up until the end of my graduation. My heart, I knew by the time that I graduated. I even bedazzled, and some of you may not know what bedazzle is because you're too young. But bedazzle is like putting rhinestones on things and tricking it out. So on my cap and gown, I put NYC on the top of my cap and gown because I knew I was coming here. I wanted to sing. I wanted to be Whitney Houston, Aretha Franklin, all the ladies. I just wanted to perform. I wanted to spread love, give love. I wanted to use the gift that God gave me to communicate with other people. So I got to New York, ended up having an audition for the USO, and that is really how I started performing in New York City. The USO is the United Service Organization, and with that organization, we were able to travel around the country and overseas to perform for the military. It's one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. And in that particular troupe with me, there were 3 of us. I was the black girl, there was a white girl, she was blonde, and there was a Jewish girl who I think looks Latina at times. So, you know, we were like, you know, 3 different, you know, colors of the world or whatever. And the 2 of them actually were theater buffs. You know, they went to theater school. I think one of them went to Michigan. I mean, like, you know, they knew how to read music. They knew how to do the darn thing. So here I am joining this troupe, not knowing how to read music, you know, having to work twice as hard because, you know, they can come into the space and look at the sheet music and go. And so I would have to pre-record my music to take home and spend the rest of the day after rehearsal learning it. I never slipped up on it because I always came into the space ready to work. I am a hard worker. I learned that from my mother and my grandmother. But being in that troupe with these 2 other women really gave me the opportunity to feel out what New York was about and learn from them the little things about theater. Now, one of them sent me in on her audition. Now, they were calling for an ethnic. Take that in. They were calling for an ethnic girl, and so she's Jewish. She looks Latina at times, you know, exotic or whatever, and she can't go to the audition. So she says to me, do you want to go? They're looking for ethnic women. This is almost 20 years ago, less actually. And I said, okay, you know, what do I have to lose? So I went in. I can't tell you what I sung because, quite frankly, I don't read sheet music, and I probably didn't even bring any in there. If I did, she probably gave it to me. And I told them to play, and I can guarantee you it was probably something from Whitney Houston because that's who I loved at the time. And I didn't get the job, but they said to me, hey, you know, I have a friend who is looking for someone to be in their cast, and maybe you can go to that audition. And that director was Charles Randolph Wright. 10 years forward, I actually do another show with him, and I'll talk about that with you. And so he sent me in on this audition. It was for a project called the 60s Project. It was with Richard Maltby, who I did not know who that was. I knew nothing of him. I just remember singing my song, and then him saying to me, well, do you have anything older? And I'm thinking, well, Whitney Houston is old. And then he was thinking more like this, like the 60s, because the show was called the 60s Project. And so I said no. So I, you know, left that audition not really knowing if I got it or not, but I got a call when I was at the nail salon in Queens. And he said that I want you to be a part of this project. Do you have any recordings or anything like that? And I was just like, no, I just want to sing. And so I came into that project, which was called the 60s Project, and it was the first piece I did in New York City. It was actually a reading. It wasn't even a full-blown production, but it was actually how I got my equity card, through that reading. Now, I'm walking into this space. Everybody there is on Broadway or has been on Broadway or going to Broadway, experience going to, theater schools and different things like that. And here I am in this space, not knowing how to read music. I didn't even know what stage left was. Let's be real. I did not know what a score was. I didn't know that there was a staff. I didn't know any of those things. But I do know that I had ears to hear and a heart to listen, and I was ready to go into that space and just soak it all in. And there were two people that really stuck out to me. Now, I will tell you, this is some years ago. So at the time, the assistant musical director, and forgive me if I say his name wrong, was Valisia LeKae, okay? Of Hamilton fame, of everything else. And there were plenty of people in the show. At the time, Thoroughly Modern Millie was running on Broadway, so Cass Morgan was in it. There were a few other people in it, and Anika Noni Rose was in it. And I see you guys love her. Anika Noni Rose was in it. I never met her, and she wasn't Disney's Black Princess back then. You know, she was Anika Noni Rose, beautiful Black princess for me, and I just watched her. I saw in her a quiet strength that was like no other. And she probably won't even remember any of this, but I watched how she moved into the space, how she communicated with people, how people received her. I watched her perform. I learned from her. I just wanted to know, okay, how does a Black girl work in this space of Broadway and theater? And I received a lot of information, and there was just a strength about her that I will never forget. And I could tell, like, she spent time with her grandmother, because there was an old soul there that I find so familiar. The other person, and he probably doesn't know this, and I think I've shared this with him maybe once or twice, was T. Oliver Reed. Now, T. Oliver Reed is one of the hardest working men on Broadway. T. Oliver Reed came into that reading. He was also doing Thoroughly Modern Millie at the same time. Came into that reading, he worked hard, he was ready to go, he was always prepared. That's what I remember about him. And he would bounce from the space of the reading to Broadway to go do his show. And I was amazed by this beautiful Black man who was just like ready at all times. So I took from him, you have to work hard to be in this business. Those two things, having strength and working hard, I carried those two things on to every show that I did, whether it being a tour, whether it being my first or second Broadway shows. I saw these two Black people as king and queens for me. And if I was going to make it in this business, those two things were going to have to be a priority for me. You work hard, you stand strong, you do the work. So when it was time for me to do a show in New York, I did one off-Broadway show with Randall Myler called Almost Heaven, which was, a John Denver musical. I met the lovely Terry Burrell, who was an original dream girl. She is my queen. She is amazing, and she is funny and gorgeous, and she keeps it real. And so I learned that from her. So I ended up doing that. I came back to New York. I got in my first Broadway show in 2006, the Three Penny Opera. Still there, I'm learning. I became a swing. I was the dance captain. Still learning. Cyndi Lauper was in the show. Alan Cumming. Jim Dale, watching him at that age, I think he was in his 70s, the man never skipped a beat. And he just moved from one place to the next. And so being able to soak that in, still I considering myself a freshman to the stage and all of those things, it was amazing. You can't buy this kind of education in college. So going from that show to doing a first national tour of Mamma Mia, where I met Michael James Scott, who is, Aladdin on Broadway, and many other things, because I just love him. To being with him, doing that show, and I say Karen Birthright, who is a lovely, amazing, beautiful Black actress, singer, performer. She made a space for me to come into that space doing the national tour of Broadway. She got another opportunity. She created a space for me to do a first national tour. So I went from doing the first national tour, Mamma Mia, to coming to New York. I think my second Broadway show was, 110 in the Shade or something like that. I can't remember now. But, so I did another tour, which was All Shook Up, and Nikki M. James created that role on Broadway. And I love it when Black women work. I always say when Black women work, I work. Because when you work, you're creating a space for me to come in. When you get another opportunity or when the tour happens, you're creating a space for me. So I am always excited when you're working, because that means more opportunities will be coming for women who look like me to hold a space, to let other women of color and Black women know that, yes, you can do this. So Nikki M. James created the role of Lorraine, and All Shook Up, I did the national tour of that. I had heard while I was on a national tour that there was this new show. They were doing this non-traditional casting of 110 in the Shade, and it was going to be led by Audra McDonald. So I called my agent and I said, now I'm playing a principal role on tour, and I am calling my agent to say, can you give me an audition for an ensemble role on Broadway? And they were like, okay. And I said, well, Audra McDonald is going to be in it, and there will be, I just don't want to miss the opportunity to learn from her. So whatever you have to do to get me the audition, do it. They called the casting agents. The casting agents told them they didn't think I was right for it. Just like looking at my picture, didn't think I was right for it. Even though the role that I would be understudying was a Black girl. And so she was creating a space for me already, being a Black girl. So at least you could see me. So I just said, you know what, just I'll fly from wherever I am. I'll spend the money. Just get me in the room. And I got there. I met with, the director was there, Lonnie Price, who I love. And they saw me, and I ended up booking the job. And, before I left my tour, my producer was actually willing to give me a pay increase to stay, but I knew that the lesson that I would learn from this woman leading the show would be so valuable that there was not enough money to stay on tour for me to miss this opportunity. And I'm glad I did, because what I learned from her was resilience. Now, I love being in a room, and as you know, from my childhood, I did not speak a lot, but I was an observer. So to be in a space where Audra McDonald was, who, the biggest, thing on Broadway when it comes to Black women at the time, she just owned her space. She was always prepared. Everything was just right on. I mean, from the props to the way she, crafted her songs, to how she delivered her monologues and her interaction with the cast. She just was resilient. And during that time of the show, her father passed away. And I can't imagine what that's like, and still having to helm a Broadway show. And she came back in a few days. Now, mind you, the show was preparing the understudy, but I think we ended up just not having a show one day. She came back in a couple of days, and she never missed a beat. Now, I don't know how this woman did this. I don't know how she was able to come back and perform for people, giving of herself when her father just passed away. But I saw that and I was like, oh, okay. This is how you be a queen on Broadway. This is how you show up to work regardless. This is how you leave your feelings at the door and you do the work. And I've always admired her for that. So that lesson was very valuable for me. So in between all of that, I'm taking everything that I'm learning from my, from Anika, from T. Oliver, from Audra, and many others who have taught me along the way. You have literally been my 4-year education into musical theater. And so from that show, I'm now starting to do, regional theater, doing principal roles. And I'm going to talk about 3 shows that really changed the course of, not change the course of my career, but change the course of my being. And I am going to be as vulnerable as possible and as honest throughout this conversation, because I've never shared a lot of these things before. So I had an opportunity. I auditioned for Oklahoma. By that time, I had done a couple of legit shows, 110 in the Shade, 3 Penny Opera. I'm seriously forgetting the second Broadway show that I did, but that's where my head is. So I had an opportunity to audition for Oklahoma, playing the role of Lori. Now, this was back in 2009, And so I really don't know if there had been any other black women at the time playing that particular role in a major regional theater. But the artistic director, I feel like, was ahead of her time. And she's a beautiful, righteous woman, and you can look her up. The theater is Arena Stage. Her name is Molly. I love her still. But I auditioned for that, and she saw something in me, blessed me with the role of Lori in Oklahoma. And I felt that I was able to, I wouldn't have gone into the audition had I not been able to successfully execute the role. So it's the fall of, I guess, 2009, summer, fall of 2009, and we're there, we're working, and we're doing scene work and all of these different things, and we're singing, and because this role was very important to me, this was a brand new theater. Millions of dollars had been spent to create Arena Stage. And so anything that I didn't really feel comfortable about, or anything that I, did not necessarily agree with when it came to cultivating and really crafting the role of Lori in a black skin, I did not speak up about. I did not want to rock the boat. I was playing a lead character in this well-known musical. There was a blackface, now me, this black girl standing in this space playing Lori. The theater was just opening. It was just its opening theater, millions of dollars behind it. And so I did not want to be or come off combative or as if I, knew more than she did or anything like that. So I constantly felt myself becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And so it started to affect my voice. And because singing is the way I communicate and it is my love, when I feel, and this is just my truth, when I feel like I am not being supported or trusted, the first thing that goes is my voice. And she mentioned it to me a couple of times, if I can remember, and obviously Molly has her story as well. She mentioned it to me a couple of times, and I felt that I was doing the work, and I brought in my voice teacher, and she helped me with some things. But I remember, we had our first preview, and I felt it went okay because, the neighborhood was coming, we did a couple of songs and all of those things. And she brought me into her office. I had my little notepad ready to go to take notes for, Lori. What are we gonna do? All of these things. I am very excited walking into her office. Like, okay, I'm ready to take notes. How are we going to execute these things? She sat me down and she said, I'm letting you go. I have never told this story before. She fired me. And it was very hard for me. And I have had years to really think about it. And let me just say this. Molly did her job, okay? I am not upset with Molly. Molly did her job. I'm sure she was under pressure to put up this theater and make the show right, and here's Oklahoma with a black girl. So, get with it, America. But she set me in her office, and she fired me. She told me, she said, I know you will go on and do great things. I'm not worried about you. I can't remember exactly, but I think it was sort of this, but I need to let you go. Now, that was on a Monday. Now, granted, the show that I did before Oklahoma, I was Ragtime. I played Sarah in Ragtime. So that was a successful run in Chicago, and I love playing that role, and I played it with Quentin Darrington from Once on This Island. And so she sat me there, she fired me. I had to pack up my bags and go. I did not get the opportunity to say bye to the cast, nor my co-star who was playing Judd, or Curly. I just had to go. And there was a press release sent out saying that I had to leave for personal reasons. And so I was scheduled to be in Chicago that night. It was a Monday, it was our day off, so we didn't really have rehearsals that day. I was scheduled to be in Chicago that night for the Jeff Awards because Ragtime, which was directed by Rachel Rockwell, who passed away last year, who was a beautiful director as well. The show had been nominated. Quentin and I had been nominated. It was a beautiful, successful run. So I flew to Chicago that night, and I had to put on the face like nothing was wrong. And people were asking me, how are things in DC? Because obviously when you do new shows, people put out press releases and say that you're doing them. So I put on the face and said everything was fine and everything was great. And I performed that night and I won the Jeff Award for Best Featured Actress. Now, in my mind, I am saying, okay, I was just fired for my acting and singing. And now I was just awarded for my acting and singing. And you can imagine the sort of emotional turmoil that seeped into my body. And so what I wanted to do was go away and just hide. Like, I just wanted to hide. You know, there were articles coming out that I had left the show for personal reasons, and, you know, people were calling me, and it was like, no, I couldn't tell them, like, I got fired, because I was ashamed, okay? I was ashamed, so I couldn't say I got fired. So I went home, curled up. I think my partner at the time had been living in Las Vegas, went home, curled up. And my girlfriend, my best friend from college, she called me and she said, I know you want to curl up into a ball right now, but I need you to rise up. She sent me this message. She sent me this clip. I think it was from YouTube, because, you know, YouTube is like 12 years old or something. I don't know. She sent me this clip. And the message was, don't let your past be a place of residence. Let it be a place of reference. I have carried that message with me every time I am down, every time I am weak. Thank God for Black girls, because that beautiful Black girl saved me that day. So I didn't have time to stop. Now, mind you what I've said. I've already told you about this passage in the Wisdom of Sundays. I was just fired. I didn't have time to stop. My agents called and said, okay, people know you left this show for personal reasons, but will you come in and fly an audition? And I did. I kept going. I did not stop. I kept going. So I buried everything inside, like Black women do all the time, because we have to, because you see us as strong Black women. So I pushed it deep down inside, and I went on to the next audition. And I kept going. And so from that opportunity led other things that happened. I think I auditioned for a while. Ended up getting into the Book of Mormon. I know there's this whole thing going on about the Book of Mormon. But I would say the majority of my time there was good. I got to meet Asmarette, who is also doing an exchange today. So please seek her out. Michael James Scott, I was reunited with him. Darlicia Cersei, who is like, for me, in my mind, she is the one. John Eric Parker, Maia, like so many of the original cast. I came in right after it opened. Terea Campbell made a space for me. She took some time off, and I ended up filling in for her. Another Black girl, creating a position for another Black girl. Love it. When you work, I work. Nikki M. James, she had already made a space for me back in the day with All Shook Up. She was leading the cast. I got to understudy her. I was really excited to be in the show because at the time I had been speaking with a friend of mine from Chicago, and her cousin was dying from cancer. And I remember when I first saw Book of Mormon, I thought it was humorous, and not everybody's going to agree with me. It made me laugh. And there, you know, I have to look back on that myself and dissect all of that. But maybe I just needed to have that space to be able to laugh. So I got in the show. I was with Book of Mormon for about a year and a half. And I was a swing, and I understudied Nabalungi. And it was a difficult show for me. Those voices that created those roles are freaking amazing. You know, it started off great for me, but, you know, when I started to have a little bit of difficulty, they were kind enough to offer me lessons, to pay for my singing lessons, to get the therapy, get the things that I need. They did that. Stephen Aremus, you know, I'm going to say this. I find him intimidating. Back then I did. I don't know him personally. He was just leading the show, and he knows his stuff. So, you know, I just wanted to sing once again. I was in the show. And so they were kind enough to work with me and get me the lessons and the work that I need, and to encourage me. And, you know, I went on for the different women, stepping in for Rima Webb, another amazing talent. Like I said, you know, Nikki, if she went on, or Asmaret, or Maya. Those are four, Darlicia, just dynamic voices. So I'm trying to, like, do the darn thing to stay in the place that I'm in. And so, you know, I ended up leaving the show only because I had been working on the workshop of Motown the Musical. So there was a time simultaneously where I was doing Motown and doing the Book of Mormon. And because I was a swing, I wasn't going on every night, but there were some nights that I was. So now we're at the place of Motown. And I started working on Motown in 2011. And I remember my audition. My agent sent me in. Now, mind you, I had grown up singing Diana Ross's songs. At the theme park, I was always the girl who was going to sing Diana Ross songs because I was black. And I was the only black girl in the show, let's be real. So I was singing her songs. So obviously, you know, when it came time for me to audition for Diana Ross, like, mind you, I had been keeping my grandmother's clothes, her vintage clothes, probably for that moment in time. So I had a full-on vintage collection of clothes, you know, just ready to go for that audition. So I showed up in that audition, probably with some sort of 50s, 60s hairstyle, 1960s dress. And I just remember the director, who was Charles Randolph Wright, by the way, looking at me and saying, "Now, are you doing something with your voice? Or, like, do you sound like that?" And I was just like, well, I'm just, you know, I'm just being Diana. And so by the time that we really needed to, like, I needed to step away from Book of Mormon because I couldn't obviously do both. I'm sorry, I'm just not that super girl. I stepped away, made a space for someone else. Allison Sims, who, P.S., was Diana Ross on the national tour. Look at God. So I left, started doing the workshops of Motown. And some people know that when I was doing Motowns and we were doing the workshops and the readings, I would come to work every day in head-to-toe Diana gear. I'm talking lashes, hair, dress, heels, everything Diana, regardless of what period. Like, you know, if we were working on 50s, and I was in 50s Diana. If we were working on 60s, 70s, I met the period. Now, for me, that wasn't difficult because my grandmother and my mother, I'd kept up for this particular moment. That was the space that I was in. And there was no way that I was going to step into this role and not honor her. This black woman, Diana Ross, who paved the way for me to even stand on the Broadway stage, I had to show up. It was an honor to come to work every day and really try to invoke her. Not just through her sound, not just through the way she spoke, but she really, you know, expressed herself through her clothing. A lot of times she would make the outfits for the Supremes. And so I wanted to honor every single thing about her. You know, there were so many things that we had, or we still have in common. Both of our fathers are named Fred. And both of us, I have this thing about her that she wanted to spread love and give love, and so did I. And so I really found myself really wanting to live in that space and honor her, and working with Mr. Gordy and the extremely talented cast. I must say that I knew what it was going to take to serve this purpose, to serve this moment in time. And not everybody did. I remember when it was time maybe a gym membership, because I knew that I needed to be in shape to play her, to really she was a slender woman. I asked for a number of things, and I could feel my soul being crushed in the negotiations. My agent obviously put his best foot forward to get what I need, but there was something about that really made me believe that, this is going to be difficult. And I started to not feel supported. And if you that when I start not to feel support or trusted, this starts to go immediately. And there were times when it did, but I didn't let it stop me. So, I was negotiating my contract in August. By the time we had done a number of pre-openings for Broadway, I mean, it was the craziest experience, because any other time you could you do a pre-opening of the real opening, but the pre-opening had people like Stevie Wonder there. I mean, we're not even open, and Stevie Wonder's at the pre-opening of the show that we haven't started rehearsals for. So that is just crazy, but it happened. And so it was time to get into the rehearsal process starting that January in 2013. And there were a number of things happening. And because I was playing Diana Ross, I felt like I was being pulled in multiple directions. There was always an interview that needed to be had, costume fittings, photography, note working sessions, all of the things that needed to happen when you're leading a mega $1 million show. Particularly one that is about the music of Motown, the soundtrack of our lives. And there were times when I started to get weak, but I kept on going. I was resilient. I was strong. There were things that I needed, and I had already told them before time that I needed those things, but I'm not sure. I think they granted me some voice lessons to help me. But I think even at that point, my soul was so crushed that I was just waking up trying to exist on the stage or in the space. I did the work, I put on the stuff, I did all of these things. I just became Diana, however I was going to get there. And I will say that my co-star, Brandon, and by the time we were starting to open in previews, let me take a moment and breathe. I remember I think before the first preview, I remember my producer walking into my dressing room, because I think that's just what he did. Walking into my dressing room or seeing me and saying, "You think I should cancel the first preview? Because, there were some things going on, but they're previews, so things happen. Shit happens." And I just thought to myself, well, I have worked my ass off to get to this space. And I think I said to him, no, I don't think you should cancel it. We had our first preview, which was we had our dress run. It was right before the dress run. So we had the dress run and people loved it. The little people, the amount of people who were there, they loved it. I remember us going up into the balcony, celebrating him, my producer being really happy about that. So the show is now starting in previews, and I'm continually trying to show up and be Diana, knowing that a little bit of my heart was broken because I really couldn't speak my mind. I tried to in my negotiations, but the things that I needed, they weren't being heard, and so I felt silenced again. I don't know if they were doing this intentionally, but their job is their job, my job is my job. I felt silence. And at my lowest point, I can look back on the pictures now, but I was somewhere between 95 and 97 pounds. Now I just want you to sink that in. I am a 32, 33-year-old woman, 95 pounds, in a Broadway show. I was sick. I don't recall anyone ever saying, or, like, what's going on, girl? I don't remember that, and if they did, forgive me for not acknowledging that. I remember us having like our press day, and one of the men from New York Daily News came through the line to talk to us during the press, and he said to me, "Are you okay? Because I noticed that you've lost a lot of weight." And I said, "Oh no, I'm fine, You lose about, 5 or 10 pounds when you do a Broadway show. That was my excuse. But I was sick, and my body was feeling it, and I was stressed. And I didn't know I was stressed because I did not express it, but I didn't feel stressed, but I know it took upon on my body. And so that's usually how I know something's wrong, because my body reacts first, and then it hits me. So during this time, we're in previews. People are noticing the show. The show is selling out. I am constantly, being called in for another interview. Throughout rehearsals, we would have, like, Bono would walk through the door. We would have to stop and sort of put on a show. And, it happened all the time. It just, it was just like we were at, Motown in Detroit, and all the stars were walking in, and we'd have to stop and do our thing and, say hi. And I just remember at one point, when we were first having one of these pre-openings of the show, and I brought all my costumes and things like that to the show. And after the show, I lugged all of my costumes, my hat box, all of the pieces of things that I had to the corner of 34th Street and 7th Avenue. And one of the white men from the show, David Goldsmith, walked out, saw me on the corner of 34th and 7th, and was like, "Where is your car?" And "What car? How are you getting home?" "I'm just gonna hop in this cab and lug all of this stuff with me." And he was mortified by the fact that here was the lead of this Broadway show playing Diana Ross, lugging her hat boxes, her wig boxes, her costumes from that whole 30-minute piece that we did on the corner of 34th and 7th. So he went back and told them. And it's sort of what changed the game for me, as far as helping them realize that I needed some things. I needed help. Like, I cannot do this alone. Like, it's Diana Ross. Like, people know her. People have been living with her forever. They're going to have their say. They're going to expect something, and I'm going to have to deliver it. And so I remember after him having that conversation with them, I never had to really worry about transportation and different things like that. But even then, throughout the show, I just felt my soul just was like not intact. The nominations and things started to come out, whether it's the Drama Desk or the, Drama League or the Theater World. Like, every time a nomination came out and that I was recognized, I felt even smaller. I couldn't even celebrate the wins. I couldn't do it because, one, I had seen everybody in my cast work really hard to bring this show to fruition. My co-star, who I love, was not being recognized. And so that made me feel a certain way. My director, the writer, Barry, weren't being recognized. That made me feel a certain way. You know, these people who are serving it up every night. So I continually felt small. So just imagine more and more my soul being crushed and crushed and crushed. So I just remember getting a nomination and not really like celebrating it, and just was like, yeah, you know, it's okay. It's, you know, it's great. I'm like, you know, I'm grateful. Not just like loving the fact that I've worked my ass off for this moment here, but I couldn't do it because everybody else around me, I didn't want to like make it seem like, you know, I was not honoring them, but I just didn't want to over celebrate the moment. So the Tonys came, and I remember having press day. I mean, it's a long day. You go from that to, you know, going to a show at night. You hear about the nominations in the morning. You know, it was the first time that I met Patina. She was really gracious and really beautiful, but I was tired. You know, I was tired, and I couldn't say that. And nor at the time I see someone talking about it, I didn't know that I was enough. I mean, I kept trying to show up. I was doing the work. I told you ahead of time what I needed, but as a black woman, you know, I didn't get that. I don't know how it is for white women in this business. When you ask for something, do you get it? Do you find yourself on the corner of 34th and 7th with, you know, your handbags and your things? I don't know. I don't know, because I'm only experiencing this from a black person perspective. So the Tonys come, and I remember after the nomination that I wanted to take a day off, and I wasn't feeling well. And I remember it being relayed to me, I think from my agent, that we'll tell her to just come in and do the lines on the stage, and we'll have her understudy sing in the wing. I just want you to take that in for a moment. So basically what you want me to do is, I'm saying to you, I am sick, and you want me to come in anyway, perform for you, and have my understudy sing in the wings. I don't even know if that's, I don't even know if the union allows that. And P.S., my understudy fucking rocked. My understudy was Ariana DeBose. She is not one to sing in the wings for me. She is a star in her own right. And believe you me, you will see that come this summer when her movie comes out. But I don't know if my white colleagues were ever told when they needed to take the day off because they were sick to come into work anyway and have your understudy go sing in the wings. I don't even know if that's possible. So I took the day off. Ariana went on. I'm sure she was fabulous. I heard she was fabulous. But that really showed me even more that you can't speak up, Valisia. There is nothing you can say. Like, no one's going to ride for you at this moment. Just do what you got to do to get through it. It's Tony nominated season. You got to come into work. You can't take days off. Even though if you need it, you can't take the days off. People are paying money to come and see you. You have to show up. Even though you're 95 pounds, even though you look sick, because I can look back at the pictures and realize that I looked sick. I had to show up anyway. And I'm not saying that that wasn't my job. I just asked for something, and it wasn't received in the best way. And that made me feel a certain way, particularly as a black woman leading a show, because I can guarantee you, my white colleagues are not asked to sing anyway and have their understudy sing in the wing. So the show goes on, and I'm just, you know, the Tonys happened. I didn't win. Patina Miller won. That was awesome. She creates another space for a black female. She is a part of the history. And, you know, we're just in the groove of the show, and things are happening, and, you know, we're just now working the show. Still a lot of people coming to see it, but it's just, we're just working the groove. And at some point, I was called into the office, and my agent called and said, okay, stage company management wants to see you. My agent was there. I think my director was there. And the company management sat me down and said, you have to leave the show for 8 weeks. I don't think it was worded that way, but it was just like, okay, you're leaving the show. We're letting you off for 8 weeks. Now, at this point, I, just sort of gotten settled into the groove. I was doing the show. My voice, I'm sure, was affected because my soul was affected, but I wasn't expecting this. I had no words. I just remember sitting in that space and just sort of accepted. I gave up. I just gave up. I sat in that office and I couldn't fight anymore. I just couldn't fight anymore. I tried to show up for you. I tried to tell you ahead of time what I needed. You didn't listen to me. My soul was crushed. So they made me take 8 weeks off. Now, you read it in the press, it's like, Valisia is going to take some personal time to, I don't really know how they worded it. But I couldn't fight anymore. And I felt like no one was fighting for me. I was led by a Black director who I'm sure was fighting for his own life in this show. There were 2 women on the creative team who I'm sure were fighting for their own right in the show. A Black choreographer who I'm sure was fighting for his own right in the show. We were all fighting to be seen and to be heard. But I couldn't fight anymore. So I let them tell me I needed to leave. They brought in another Black girl who replaced me. And my agent fought for me to be paid during that time. Thank God. Because by the time that I got back to the show, I spent some time having a physical checkup from that show. And I found out that I had a tumor that had tripled in size. And I just want you to take that in because the previous year, the tumor was very, very tiny. But from that August to the following August of 2012, 2013, that tumor tripled. So that tumor encompassed fear, encompassed anger, encompassed sorrow. That tumor was the disease that nearly killed me. So by the time that I had to come back to the show, I had to leave again because I needed to have that tumor removed. And my voice still wasn't great. So I sat back in that space, into the theater, coming back, knowing that I'm gonna have to leave in another 2 weeks and somebody else will replace me. I leave in 2 weeks. I have the surgery to remove the tumor. The tumor comes back cancerous. Now I had to sit with the knowledge that I did that to myself, that I did not speak up for myself, that I held everything in and I made myself sick. So it took me a very long time to come to grips with that. And deep down inside, even though I had my situations with different people, different producers, different creative teams, different directors, when it all boils down, the thing that really hurt me the most was that I did not speak up for myself. There was anger, there was sadness, and it took me a long time to really dig deep and to pull back the layers to know that it was me who was my greatest advocate. No one can beat me being me. No one can stand up for me more than myself. And so I had to come to grips with that.
It took a very long time for me to forgive myself. It took a long time for me to forgive those that I had worked with, the producers, the creative team. And in my process of going through ovarian cancer and becoming a spokesperson and speaking out about ovarian cancer and what it is, I even saw myself in that space not having anyone that I could relate to. So learning about the disease, there were no women that looked like me on the websites. There were no women of color. They were all white women in their 50s. And so here I am, full of cancer, ovarian cancer, never have had this disease before, going into another space, not pausing, fighting. So I hit the bat running. I was diagnosed on December 2nd. I was doing an interview about ovarian cancer on December 3rd or 4th. Because I needed people to see, like, this is happening. Young Black women in their 30s are being diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and there is no one talking about it. We are not showing up on the websites. They don't even recognize the fact that this skin color, this being, this human also gets sick too, also gets cancer too. So I spent a lot of time fighting to be seen and heard. I would go into spaces being the only Black person at the convention or at the organization. And it was just like, where is it? Where are you, my people? So a lot of my journey has been about me constantly going from one place to another. Me not having the courage to pause in between time because I needed to work hard and go to the next show and just be successful. But I will say the one thing about my journey with cancer, it allowed me to have a pause and to really think about all the things that rose to the surface, all the things that I needed to be aware of, all the things that I needed to peel back the layers to speak about, how to use my voice, how to be my best advocate. That time, which took about 4 or 5 years, mind you, and even in some of my lowest points, I wanted to die. But that time really taught me that, Valisia, you're gonna always be your biggest advocate. You are a Black woman navigating these waters. Not everybody's going to speak up for you. Not everyone's going to think you're beautiful. Not everyone is going to think you are enough. So if you want the world to see you that way, you have to realize that about yourself. So I had to do the work. I had to do the work. I had to pull back the layers, and it was hard and it was scary, and I wanted to die constantly. Because the truth is, once again, I did not speak up for myself. So I know I've been sharing my journey for you for quite some time, but I stand in this moment being the most vulnerable I have ever been. I have never shared these stories with a lot of people, even some of my closest friends. But in this space, I'm asking you to really hear me, to see me, and to know me. To know me as a Black woman, that I have navigated this space and I've done the best that I could with what I had. That some of my white colleagues never had to go through these sort of situations because they didn't have to. Because they were white. It just was, they got it. Like the producers got it. Like, yeah, this person's going to need certain things. But I will always speak up for myself. And I only share this story for you because I hope there is some little Black girl in Memphis who's like, I want to do that someday. But I want her to learn from my mistakes. So I say to you, you are enough. I am enough. I will always be enough. I was always enough. And I have every bit of generosity, love, fear, anger, vulnerability. I am just like you. I am human. And I pray that as you journey through life, when you see people that look like me walking down the street or in your environment, you don't see them as a threat. You see them as a human being, just trying to exist, trying to create, trying to love, trying to be courageous, trying to stand in this place that is We just want to be seen and heard too. We want to be treated equally. And I hope that my story teaches you that you can speak out for yourself. I have given you my heart today, and I swear to God, when I hang up with you guys, I'm gonna want to like erase all of this, but I'm not. I'm just gonna let it exist in the space. But I thank you for being with me this time. I thank you for giving me your heart. I thank you for letting me come into your homes, and I want to thank Sierra Boggess again for just giving me this platform to share my story. I can come back later and take some of your questions. I'm already like running an hour and like 10 minutes, and I'm sorry that I've kept you so long, but if you have any questions, I am here to take them. I'm gonna, I think your name is Victoria. Thank you so much for that compliment. Somebody named Jason. Okay, I'm not sure who that is, but yeah. So like I said, I'll be back throughout the day. Just I've given you a lot of me, but I'll be back throughout the day just to share other things with you, and really just here to sort of take your questions. But I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm seeing things, and believe me, this is new to me. But I am hoping that you did learn from my experience. Thank you, SJ. But yeah, so thank you so much again for allowing me to be here. I honor you with today, and I say that you go out and you are enough. Continue to spread the light. And thank you to Dion Figgins, who facilitated this, and Miss Sierra Boggess. I will be coming back to you later sometime today to either share some of my favorite quotes or to share some of the stories of my ancestors, which I love to do. Thank you so much for your guidance throughout this time and just being so wonderful. Okay, I'm going to end now, but thank you so much, and love to you all.